All right, so welcome to Unit 8. We're moving on to the next unit. We finished up the Age of Revolutions and absolutism and absolute rulers. So we're moving into the Industrial Revolution and imperialism. And so basically what's happening is we have the introduction of factories, manufactured goods, and countries are going into other nations and trying to take over. So that's what we're looking at. This is going to cover Standard 15 and 16. We're going to start with 15 and the Age of Industrialization. We'll work into imperialism. We'll take it one day at a time. All right, so we'll start with the impact of industrialization and the idea of urbanization, or the movement from So today is to be able to analyze the process in industrialization. What we're looking at is, how did industrialization take place, and what was in all three of those countries or those nations. All right, so keep in mind when you're watching these videos, you need to be taking notes. We'll give you your vocabulary sheet the day we start the notes, which will be Wednesday, but that may differ based on when we're presenting this PowerPoint. But you need to be taking notes and use your vocabulary sheet, okay? The first term that you see on here that's in purple is industrialization, and then you also have another term down at the bottom. Those are your vocab words, and then what's in yellow is what you need to be writing down, okay? So industrialization, that time period is going to take place really in the 1800s, so really mostly the 19th century, and it'll spill into the 20th century. But industrialization is the process by which an economy is transformed from a primarily agricultural one, or farming and animal herding, to one based on the manufacturing of goods, or factories and manufacturing plants. So we want to talk about first, why did the Industrial Revolution start in Great Britain? Well, first of all, Great Britain is rich in coal and iron, okay? So coal we use for energy, and iron we use to build things, and then they had waterways to ship everything, and then harbors to dock. The other reason that the Industrial Revolution takes place in Great Britain is they've experienced an agricultural revolution already, okay? So it's something that they're prepared for. They're ready, they can change, they can adapt. And then during the Age of Exploration, they're finding new materials, new raw materials from other countries. So this gives them ideas on what kind of new products they can create, okay? You also see the migration of the poor from farms into cities. Let me go back one, I apologize. Okay. And we call this urbanization. So when the poor people are moving from farms into the cities, and you start to see a huge increase in the population in the cities, that's called urbanization. It's an urban area, and the number of people or the population is growing, okay? In order for industrialization to take place and for it to be successful, you need 4 factors of production. And this is something that you'll learn in economics class your senior year. But the first one is land. You need space, and you need raw materials, okay? Like wood and iron and coal and other raw materials to be able to create your products. You also need labor. You need people to work. You need capital or money to invest, to buy the stuff you need to create your factories and hire your workers and buy the raw materials. And you need entrepreneurship. You need somebody who's willing to take the risk to start a business. Okay, so all 4 of those being present and good and efficient and quality and substantial will allow industrialization to take place and for it to be successful. Now, with the increased number of people working in factories, business owners are going to try and cut costs because they want their profits to be as high as possible. So working conditions are pretty poor during the Industrial Revolution, and workers band together to create unions. Again, the words that are in purple or pink are your vocab terms, the yellows, your notes. But a union is an organization that's created by workers to protect the workers. And they'll use those unions or those groups to help protect them from poor working conditions and maintain substantial pay. Okay? The Industrial Revolution in Great Britain, though, let's talk about a couple of things, okay? In order for production to take place and in order for production to increase, okay, three things will grow out of this. The first one is the division of labor, okay, where you get kind of mass producing cars or the belt that moves product through the factory, and each person does one little part to it. Somebody puts the door on the car, somebody puts the tires on the car, somebody puts the body of the car on, okay? And you do this because it allows business owners to cut costs. If every worker is skilled in one thing, then you don't have to pay them nearly as much, and you can make more products in a faster or a shorter amount of time, okay? Then you have what's called mass production, okay? Division of labor, by giving each worker a small task on the assembly line, leads to mass production, meaning you're producing tons of that product in a shorter amount of time, okay, which means you can get it out to more people in the marketplace, okay? This increase in productivity then allows us to decrease the cost it is for us to make the product. And then you have interchangeable parts. If you create a product or an assembly line or factory equipment that has parts that can be easily substituted one for another, you can keep those things going. You can decrease the cost it takes to make things. Okay, so your interchangeable parts is one of your vocab terms too. All right. And then in order for it to take place in Germany, okay, Germany at this time, Prussia, and in 1835, Prussia began to study what was going on in Great Britain. They began to study the economy and industrialization and how it was occurring and what their industries looked like. They even sent their children there to study, and they brought British engineers back and equipment from Great Britain. So Germany took Great Britain's ideas in industrialization and then created it or duplicated it in Germany. Textile factories, your manufacturing plants, your railroads, and your coal mines begin to start popping up everywhere in Germany. And as some famous author once said, they start sprouting from the earth like mushrooms. Mushrooms grow everywhere. And they come up really fast. So that's just something to consider. Okay, and then for it to grow in Japan, okay, now again, we're talking about three different places. For years and years, about 150 years, Japan would not allow their people to interact with foreigners. Well, because of that, they had no access to the ideas and what was happening in those other countries, so Japan couldn't really grow. They couldn't really industrialize right away. They couldn't have an advantage in that because they wouldn't listen to other countries. They closed their doors off. Well, around the 1850s, the U.S. brings their Navy in, and they start demanding trade privileges with Japan. Well, Japan technologically hasn't been able to grow over the last 150 years. They're not prepared to defend themselves against a huge naval fleet from across the globe. So eventually the leaders of Japan, the shogun, who's your political leader in Japan at this time, he wasn't in a position to be able to turn the U.S. away. He kind of had to just allow them to come in. Okay, eventually, a few years later, the British and the French will come in as well. And history has shown us that Asian countries weren't prepared because they closed their doors to other countries. It's not necessarily a bad thing they closed their doors, but it did not prepare them for these countries with huge naval fleets to come in and attack. Eventually, in Japan, this is going to lead to a civil war because the Japanese people are incredibly angry with their leaders for allowing this to happen. They'll overthrow the shogun, and then they'll implement a new government in Japan, and it's going to be called the Meiji Restoration. And we'll stop there.